Purple Valkyrie, thank you so much for coming on the very first episode of what we're still calling the WOOWOO Show. If you've got a better name, please give it to me. WOOWOO. It works. But it's not the branding I was hoping for. It just works, yes. Before we started recording, we had a great conversation about dinosaurs, asteroid impacts, unidentified flying things. So I'm going to be really excited as we move forward to do more shows about the WOOWOO. This is an interesting article, comes to us from the Daily Caller. And I think in particular, it's interesting because it fuses two major paranormal woo-woo extraterrestrial themes, that being unidentified flying objects and a favorite of Purple, Skinwalker Ranch.
So this article for me ticks all of the boxes. And when you sent it, I was so excited. I was like, this is the sort of thing that we need to talk about. This is the sort of thing we need more of on YouTube. So I'm so thrilled to get to start this series.
So this is from the Daily Caller, but it wasn't in their woo-woo ha-ha section. It was in their national security section, where you look at things that are threats to the United States or to, the Western world. And so they actually categorized this article, the title of which, Pentagon investigator claims military service members experienced paranormal activity after visiting haunted ranch.
I was very, very excited to get to see this. I think it's something that's going to be really interesting to go over. And as you say, it was in the national, security. And we've seen over the past few months, and probably the past 18 months, I would say, there's been a lot of UFO declassified. So this is much more in the public eye now, whereas before this would have been a story that would have been kind of buried, I think is the best way to put it.
This is an officer, James Lakatsky, and also a defense contractor, Cullum Calheller, claimed that 3 United States military service members, after they worked at Utah's Skinwalker Ranch, came home and have experienced a rash of paranormal events since leaving that location.
Cullum Calheller actually has a background, he has a really strong connection with Skinwalker Ranch. I believe he published a book with George Knapp about the place as well. So if anyone's going to know what they're talking about, I believe him. He knows all about the goings on and what people have experienced there.
What's important to note about this is it's not just some Fruit Loop in his basement writing books trying to make money. And these were the 2 gentlemen that were responsible for really getting out the information about that Tic Tac UFO, that thing that was seen by the United States Navy Nimitz Strike Force Group.
And it was very interesting to me to see the shift. Traditionally, we think of UFOs as flying saucers, but now we've got this idea of Tic Tacs, and this seems to be the more prevalent and reported sightings that people are seeing. So I find that really fascinating.
CAG, the commander of the air group who was responsible for the sortie that afternoon, who saw that Tic Tac UFO, actually went on the congressional record about it. Now, if you want to have a lucrative career post retirement from the military in a place like Washington, D.C., the last thing you're going to do is say, you know what? I saw little green men. Give me a job.
Yes, and for me, that's why it lends a lot of credence. These guys went out of their way to bring this story to the public eye. And as you say, they could have kept silent. There's no reason that they had to do this. They could have had much easier lives, I would imagine, had they just kept it under wraps. But I'm really glad that they didn't.
So here we are, and this is the Tic Tac UFO. The Pentagon officially released this Navy footage of 3 UFOs and confirmed that it's real. And like you said, Purple, they said they're going to declassify even more information about unidentified flying objects and also unidentified surface objects, things that are also unexplained that are under the waves.
Which seems to be something that we're seeing a lot more of recently. Everyone knows the stories of the UFOs, bright lights in the sky, patterns being seen, but what we're seeing more of now, and people reporting, especially pilots, are vehicles and UFOs coming out from under the ocean and taking off that way. And as we said before, because these things are becoming more prevalent and as more and more of them are becoming declassified, I think it's important to keep it in the public eye. And not everybody has this fascination that we have, but I think it's a really important subject.
I'm not sure how you can't look at what this is and understand that this is coming from the nose gun camera on a top of the line, state of the art advanced intercept fighter aircraft for the United States Navy, launched off of a multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier loaded with sensitive electronics. It's just unbelievable to me. Why we wanted to put this out there was to show that these were the guys that were responsible for declassifying that and following it up with it on the congressional record. And as you said, one of them actually wrote a book about it and also was involved in the same paranormal research here at Skinwalker Ranch. One of the men who worked with Lakatsky and Kelleher on the Nimitz investigations was a sailor described as a senior engineer in naval intelligence. And this is, of course, again, not from the world news and your UFO weekly. This is from military.com. In 2009, Lakatsky and Kelleher sent the sailor and 2 Marines to Skinwalker Ranch. Of course, as you said, Purple, a location with an ancient reputation for air quotes strange happenings. Talk about the understatement of the year. And as Purple had mentioned, the native Ute and Navajo people believed that that location was linked to malevolent witches called skinwalkers. And this is not from Wackadoodle Weekly. This is from military.com. Purple, what is your reaction to seeing that this is in a United States serviceman-oriented news journal reporting on this?
Yes, these aren't, regular Joe Blow off the street. This is people with very serious jobs, very serious positions within their respective military. Absolutely. These aren't people who are generally prone to flights of fancy. They don't go about and, talk about outlandish stories. They tend to be very thorough, very methodical, and the fact that they are so happy to talk about this, I think, lends a huge credence to it.
So for people like this to come out there and start talking about these experiences, to me, I think that means that something is going on.
Yes, and with the background and the history that Skinwalker Ranch has, it's been bought and sold several times, and everybody that has had, stayed there for any particular length of time has had some sort of experience, whether it be a sighting that they can't explain. There have been talks of orbs that have been seen. Sherman himself had obviously the most weirdness happen because he was there the longest, but there have been things like cattle mutilations that have been recorded as well, weird lights in the skies, portals that people have seen, and this goes back, as you say, to the indigenous people who believe that this entire basin is a no-go zone. You do not enter this place. It is basically cursed land.
Someday we'll also talk about David Paulides, but there was in his movie, The Missing 411, The Hunted, there was a very similar situation with the Crazy Mountains where a bow hunter just disappeared and they didn't find his remains except that they found his skull in one place. They found the bones in another, and then down the trail they found a backpack with all of his stuff neatly laid out, and no one can explain how the hell that happened, but that is for another show. What's interesting here is this David Bigelow guy, and Purple, I know we're going to get into it when we just talk about Skinwalker Ranch, but this is an individual that, along with the United States Department of Defense, put a lot of money into researching this. So 3 servicemen worked at Skinwalker Ranch while it was owned by this gentleman, Robert Bigelow. This was someone who privately funded research with the United States Department of Defense on UFOs and paranormal activity. Details of their experience have been kept concealed by, again, the United States Department of Defense, but since leaving, they and their families have all experienced paranormal activity. It was their families, too. And I know when I spoke with Zaxx had an interesting take on all this, which has to do with becoming sensitized to events.
There's something about that space, and then that kind of, for me, when I see this stuff, the fact that it follows them around, I think is interesting as well, because that lines up with sort of an idea that I've been tossing around, which is called the unifying theory of paranormal. And the idea starts with that many of these things may not be coming from other places. They may be coming from within space here. So the UFOs could be coming from other galaxies, or they could be coming from somewhere within here, whether that be extra dimensional, hidden somewhere, or that as people have developed over time, you can prove that we learn how to see, what to see, and what to recognize. And so along with this theory is once someone's experienced something like a Skinwalker, where maybe the veil is thin, if that's what it is, when you go somewhere else, you've now learned to see things you couldn't see before. And so now you see them. It doesn't mean they're necessarily following you, but it means you're aware that these things are out there, and you're able to recognize them, whereas most people can't or don't.
You become sensitized. You essentially learn to listen. You know, it's kind of what achieving meditation does. You know, instead of being so narrowly focused in such a narrow band, you're able to expand. Is it consciousness? Would that be the right word? It really is your awareness and consciousness of other things that are going around. You know, what is it? Human beings, they say we only use 2 or 3% of our actual brain capacity. Mm-hmm. What is that other 97, 98% there for? To me, it's got to be some type of additional senses or awarenesses that maybe if people are put in the right situations, whether it be because of environmental conditions or harmonics or audio tones like binaural rhythms, that those things get triggered in that case. That's supposition, but that's, I guess, the position that I have on this. Purple, what's your kind of take on they and their families all experiencing this paranormal activity?
I think it's very interesting, like you say, that the families also can corroborate what happened, that they themselves had, you know, weird experiences. And I think I would absolutely agree that there is something that has been kind of unlocked with people, and maybe it goes back to our ancestors where we had to have a heightened sense of awareness of what was going on, and something that we may have lost, you know, with our modern lifestyles. But once you get thrown into something weird and something otherworldly happens, it kind of tunes you back in to something. You know how people say they see shadow people, or if they see ghosts and things like that. It's this kind of attunement I think not everybody has, but I think everybody has the potential to have.
I'm going to borrow Graham Hancock's phrase. We as a species have amnesia. We don't know what we really were before the last ice age ended. We don't know where maps, hyper accurate maps, came from that were copied and kept by ancient Chinese civilizations, that suddenly mariners in the 14th and 15th century had more accurate maps than we did until we developed satellites here in our, air quotes, modern and developed society. I think you're right. I think very few of our ancestors survived whatever happened, whether it was a mass coronal injection or, you know, a major asteroidal impact around 11,600, 800 years ago, whatever it is. And because of that trauma, we just had to learn how to focus on survival. And we've lost this enhanced ability that we have very clearly. To me, that with all of this 98, 97% extra brain capacity, I just wonder what it takes to flip a switch to get 2 or 3% of it. What's fascinating in this article is that these men returned home from Utah at Skinwalker Ranch, and they went to Washington, D.C. I've lived and worked, and I'm not going to dock. I've lived and worked in Washington, D.C., and I can tell you that this is not the thing where you pick up the phone and call the D.C. Metro or the Northern Virginia Police and say, you know what, there's a werewolf in my backyard.
The way I see it, as you say, these people have no real reason to lie about this. You know, this isn't, as you say, somebody just random off the street who is looking to make a quick buck by selling it to whatever media outlet will buy the story. And the fact that they are all seeing this same creature and describing the same creature is bizarre. And this isn't something I would imagine they've ever seen before. This is something that is very well documented within the Skinwalker Ranch. You know, one of the real talking points that people have said time and time again are these weird looking wolf creatures.
I know there's something called the power of suggestion. And I know that if people are like, oh, my daddy worked at Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm going to say, you know, is that possible? We have to admit that that's a possibility. But again, I keep coming back to you would not let your kids, you would not be going out and saying all this stuff. You really wouldn't. I mean, and now we can flip to the conspiracy side and we can say, well, that's just means that the government is doing something they don't want us to know, and this is obfuscation. Okay, that's possible. But I keep coming back to, this is in military.com. It's the same damn things that we've heard about from Skinwalker Ranch, not just in the last year, 2 years, but for 100 years, the legacy of this cursed Ute in Navajo land.
If you know the stories of the Skinwalkers, one of the most famous forms that they take is of a wolf. For me, it really kind of ties it all together.
It's stuff like this, not just the Skinwalker Ranch research, in which the, again, Bigelow, the United States Department of Defense, were both involved heavily in and had a major project going on there, which they still have not fully released details on. They had a show, I believe it was on history, which I think was obfuscation for what was really going on, which I think is, in my opinion, a resonance or portal perspective. I can't prove that. But what is interesting about Skinwalker Ranch is that people are starting to do geological and mineralogy based excavations of that area. Skinwalker Ranch has an extraordinarily heavy, deep deposit of a mineral. Now, who cares? Well, here's why you should care. Gilsonite. Results from areas that have had major asteroidal impacts. So we're talking about something just manages to hit that particular area in Utah where Skinwalker Ranch is, and deposits a whole lot of gilsonite, along with a lot of other things from the farthest edges of the galaxy right there. Now, I have got to think that part of why this resonance or this residue or this effect that's being felt at Skinwalker Ranch has got to have something to do with the composition of these rare earth minerals, the nanodiamonds that occur when you have a major asteroidal impact. People make fun of those who wear crystals and rub crystals and all of those things. At the same point, what if there's some truth to that? As ever, this is Salty Texas Sea. I am Corey DB. Thanks so much for watching. If you've liked what you've seen and heard, please hit that thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed, I'd love to have you on board. That way you know, and we have things like live streams, which we are now going to be doing every Tuesday evening. Take care. I hope you're having a great 2022.